So that weekend was an experience now, wasn't it? What possessed me to sign up to do the Armed Forces Challenge Ride and the Highlands Gran Fondo in the same weekend? That just about broke me. Hey there. I'm just another John Q. Public on a bike, a Joshua Q. cyclist, if you will. Get it? It's JQC. It's clever, right? Well, a little clever. I'm not a pro. I'm not an expert. Heck, I'm not even a bike mechanic. So why am I sitting here talking to you about cycling and the journey I set myself on? I'm one of who knows how many out there who love to ride their bike, go fast, and want to challenge themselves on the bike, but aren't racers. There's no team, fancy bus, army of trainers and mechanics, big budgets, and all that. Just someone who gets that thrill of freedom on the bike and wants to challenge themselves to something new. Let's step back a little bit and look at how this insane schedule came to be. Months ago, I signed up for the Armed Forces Cycling Classic Challenge Ride. This is like the 6th or 7th year that I've done this. I'd say kind of like 6.5 because the 2020 ride was not an actual in-person event. What the organizers did that year was to publish a route to do an in lieu of type of thing. So of course I did that course to keep in the spirit of the event. Side note, I don't think I'm going to do that course again. While it did provide multiple challenges along the route, there were sections that I didn't find particularly safe with some of the drivers in the area, and there was a distinct lack of places to top off water and pause if needed. But back to this chaotic weekend. See, I signed up for the challenge ride and I was good to go. This, along with the Bike MS ride, are the annual rides that I always look forward to. For this ride, there's about 1,500 other riders, and what we do is we ride up and around the Pentagon and kind of just racing ourselves against the clock. The challenge ride is basically a 3-hour time trial where you only have yourself to compete against. I mean, yeah, sure, after the fact, you can look at the results and see how you did against other people in your age group, but ultimately, you're pitted against what you think you can do and want to do with those 3 hours. My goal is always to knock out 9 laps to go for the gold. Every year, minus 1, well, 2 if you count 2020, where there weren't any medals given, I secured the gold medal for completing the required 9. Are they participation awards? Yeah, kinda. But you still have to earn the one that you get. Bronze, silver, gold. So yeah, I hang those loud and proud on my wall because why not? One year I only did 8 laps, but I did get a puncture, and the time that it took to get back rolling ate up the time that I needed to squeeze in that one last lap. I've done 9 laps all the previous rides and really want to aim for 10 or 11 laps to push myself that little bit further. By keeping up with training and regular rides and finding a good pace line, I don't think that'll be too difficult of a goal to reach. So this was my mindset approaching the ride. I'd been doing well on training, and this would be a good test to see what, if any, improvements I've made. But what about the fondos I wanted to do? Remember how I said I was looking at the Georgia Gran Fondo as a potential second ride in the series for me? Yeah, that didn't happen. I wasn't able to make that work with my schedule, so I didn't go. I did start getting emails about the New Jersey ride, though, the Highlands Gran Fondo. I stuck that in the back of my mind to mull over for later. Well, what did I say in a previous cafe stop? Sometimes my lack of immediate action means I'm scrambling last minute. Okay, most times. Looking at the calendar, I already knew that this was going to be a busy weekend. Not only was the challenge ride happening, but I also was potentially going to Pennsylvania for a roller derby game. No, not to skate, but as support and probably photographing it. But I also saw that I was starting to let the fondos take a back seat going against what I had set for my goals and plans this year. So while I was on travel for work, I went ahead and signed up for the Highlands Gran Fondo less than a week before it happened. This meant that my weekend was get up early on Saturday for the 7 a.m. start time for the challenge ride, do the 3-hour ride, go home and shower up, drive to Pennsylvania, watch the derby game, drive to New Jersey, stay the night, and then to get up super early to do the 100-mile fondo. That all sounds smart, doesn't it? Well, let me add the cherry on the top of that cake with this whole situation. What I didn't mention was that I signed up for the fondo while I was on travel for work. Yeah, I was sitting in my hotel room in Las Vegas, making a last-minute decision for a ride on Sunday, knowing that I wasn't getting back home from work until that Friday evening. So there I am, a few time zones away, no time on the bike to stretch out the legs or get a Zone 2 session in. I'm getting back from home, packing for the weekend shenanigans, making sure the bike is ready for the events, kind of make sure I'm ready too, but yeah, I don't think I was going to be quite ready. Saturday morning, everything came together quite nicely. I woke up and got moving, ready and excited about the challenge ride. I constantly was reminding myself that I had a longer, more difficult ride the next day, so don't go too hard on this ride. I gotta save something for the next day. I knew I could easily get the 9 laps in if I paced myself early on and stuck to that average speed. In previous years, what I tended to do was go out hard and heavy the first few laps and then get progressively slower for the remainder of the laps, feeling spent by the time I hit my goal. If you recall, pacing was one of the areas that I knew I needed to improve on for the Fondos, and this event was the perfect opportunity to test out my progress in that area. Because of the course and the number of people, you're never really alone out on the course. So when a pace line flies by or you see someone up ahead, it's easy just to kick it in gear a little and push to join that line or pass that person ahead. Being able to resist those temptations on the challenge ride meant that I had made progress on the mental approach to pacing. And if I could pace there, then I should be able to pace well on the longer, more challenging ride on Sunday. I'm happy to say that my pacing was pretty spot on. There was only a variation of about 30 seconds between all my laps, and for some reason, my even laps tended to be better than my odd laps. Seeing those numbers after the fact was a treat. I was paying attention to what I was doing and sticking to it. Old dog, new tricks for sure. That said, not everything was smooth sailing. I'd noticed that my back tire was quickly losing air. By the middle of the second lap, it was feeling soft, and at the end of the third lap, I had to stop at the mechanic station to top off the air. 2.5 laps later, I was in the same boat and needed to stop again. This time, I put a tube in. I'd been running tubeless for the past year and topping off the sealant as needed, but chalk it up to pushing the calendar a little far because the tires were due for another top off of sealant, and I thought I could squeeze out 1 or 2 more weekend rides before doing so. The lack of sealant proved otherwise. Lessons learned. I kissed my gold medal to do and figured I'll just ride out the rest of the time to at least enjoy the spin. However, keeping control of my pacing meant that I was still on track to get the 9 laps needed. And in actuality, I was only about 3 minutes shy of being able to get the 10th lap in. That day was an even bigger win than I had expected. A mechanical issue, and I was still hitting my goals. I didn't feel too winded or overly spent once I got off the course. This was just what I needed to wake the legs up after all that time in the airplane and for all the driving that was in store for the rest of the day. So jumping forward a little on Saturday to the arrival of the hotel, the 11:30 p.m. arrival to the hotel, just enough time to get settled in, get some sleep for the 5 a.m. wake-up call. Remind me again who the genius was who thought this was a good idea? Yeah, never mind. Sunday morning. The forecast looked absolutely lovely all day long. I made it to the start point, grabbed my rider packet, pinned the numbers on me and the bike, and I was ready to go. It should be a good day in the saddle. I'd been doing training sessions for Hilly Fondo and working on my fitness. Sure, I missed a lot of the endurance days and some of the training sessions, and I was in the middle of the training plan, but I figured there should be some improvement. I wasn't expecting a day and night difference in my ability to tackle the hills, but I figured there should be some noticeable change. At least I hoped. Let me take a pause to quickly mention that when I first signed on to this ride, I thought the climbing was a little over half of what the course listing actually was. I thought it would be a nice little step up from the Florida ride, but not a leap. When I was loading the route onto my bike computer, I looked at the elevation and I was pretty surprised. That's what I get for not paying attention in the first place, though. So I had that playing in the back of my mind, but I was managing the expectations and kept telling myself that pacing was the name of the game. All right, it was time to get rolling. It didn't take too long to get the legs alive and kicking, and the ride started off feeling really good. Unlike the Florida ride where the start was staggered, this was a mass start, and I liked that. We had a larger group at the beginning and for a longer amount of time. It reinforces that idea that we're all in this together. I was cruising along, enjoying the morning and the ride with everyone, so much so that I didn't even notice the first time section at all. I think the group I was riding with either didn't notice it either or just didn't care because the pace didn't pick up and there didn't seem to be a sense of urgency. Merrily, we rolled along. And then some hills hit. Okay, when I say some hills hit, What I meant to say was flat roads were now a rarity, and welcome to the world of you're either climbing or descending. And these hills weren't just some rollers to keep the landscape interesting. No, these were climb after climb, and at least in my mind, increased in intensity and length each hill we came across. I was pedaling along, okay, I thought. I was passing and being passed. The mindset wasn't to pass people, but to try and maintain the cadence and forward momentum up the climb. So any rider I passed was really just happenstance. I do want to say that being passed on a climb is fine. You think, well, they found the right momentum before hitting the steep part and was able to use that to give them that boost. But it's another thing entirely when you get passed by someone that looks like they're out on a Sunday stroll. You don't see the struggle or strain of the climb, just someone having a nice day out on the bike. How? How does that happen? I know. Training, experience, weight of the rider and the bike, equipment, and ability are the main contributors, but damn if it isn't demotivating to see that as you're using your whole body to give those cranks one more push forward, chewing the stem and giving all you've got to make any sense of forward progress, to then see someone look like they're putting in no effort at all. I have a long way to go, apparently. Just like the previous Fondo, after the first time section, the larger pack starts to spread out quickly, and what was most of the riders turns into small groups and solo riders like myself. If you remember from my Florida Fondo recap, I mentioned I should try to link up with some other riders and join some pace lines to help with the better use of energy. Yeah, this wasn't the one to give that a go. I didn't run into many lines. I'm guessing they were way ahead and beyond my capabilities. There were some riders that we would kind of latch onto each other's wheels from time to time, but given how many rollers and climbs we had, those would break up quickly once the incline started. I need to mention something that I did that I've never done on any ride since I started considering myself a cyclist. And not only did I do this once, but I did it twice. I had to walk my bike up the remainder of 2 hills. There we were climbing this beast of a hill, and to say I was struggling would be an understatement. There were times that my bike computer did an auto pause because I wasn't going fast enough for it to recognize movement. Yeah, that slow. I was in my last gear and was grinding for all I had. I started swinging back and forth to get that little bit of motion to help get up that climb. I was breathing really hard, and it was kind of difficult to get those, good deep breaths where your body is needing it. My arms were getting tired, and with each slow motion stroke, I was wondering if I'd be able to turn the cranks one more time. And then I just stopped. I needed to get my breathing under control and resettle my mind. I was hearing 2 voices in my head. One voice was saying, "You can do this. One turn after another, pull up and push down to help keep you going. You've got this." Then there was another voice that was actually louder. "You thought you could do this, didn't you? You thought you were better than you actually are. Who do you think you are? You try to look like a cyclist with the clothes and a flashy looking fake bike with your fake skills. You are the most amateur of amateurs." Can you guess which voice was more prominent in my head and was winning out? So I stopped. I pulled over to the side and stood there, getting my breathing under control and trying to get my mind under control. Just look at all those others. Sure, they're struggling, but they're going a little faster than you, and more importantly, they're making it up the hill. Yeah, the mental madness can really take over quickly. There I was, standing a little more than halfway up the hill, contemplating my life choices and whether I was a cyclist that deserved to be there or not. A couple riders passed me, and I was looking at how to get rolling again on this incline. And then I saw it. I saw a guy about a third of the way up start to walk his bike. And that's when I said, screw it, I'm walking. I can't do the rest of this hill. So I walked the rest of the way up the hill. Looking at what elevation that had already been climbed and some quick math to see how much is left, my approach to the ride instantly changed. I went from hoping to do better with the timed sections compared to the Florida ride and to try and get at least closer to the middle or top half of the age group to me wanting to just finish the ride. I didn't care a whole lot about the timed sections. The new goal was to finish the ride and survive. Despite the negative voice in my head, I was still in fairly decent spirits when riding. for the most part. The weather was nice, and being on the bike is still amazing. Bikes are ridiculously cool, and being on one is always awesome. And then more issues started to spring up. This was the weekend for the bike to just not be a cooperative partner in my cycling adventures. The day before was the flat tire, and today it was the brakes. It seemed that I needed to basically prime the brakes when I needed to use them. I would pull the levers a few times to stiffen them up before they became useful. Even with that, I didn't really have good strong grip on the rotors. I would slow down some, enough to make some turns safely, but not enough to stop suddenly if something happened. So it looks like I need to bleed the brakes again and make sure there's nothing wrong with the hydraulic lines. The day before, the brakes were doing pretty good, so I didn't think about them, but today was a different story. Trust me, I'm not using the brakes as an excuse for my performance. You don't need brakes to climb a hill. That fail was all on me and my legs. I mentioned the brakes as a way to show how the mental state was deteriorating as the miles kept ticking along. With each rest stop, I would take a moment, stretch the legs, and center myself. These pauses helped to get me to want to hop back on the bike and keep going. If it weren't for those rest stops, who knows how the end of the ride would have gone. There I am, pedaling along and trying to feel partly good for my efforts. Sure, this is the hardest ride I've ever done, period. So I got to give myself some credit for continuing to push along and overcoming these obstacles. Yeah, I walked up some, but look at those hills that you stayed clipped in and grinded up. Plus, you're on a bike on a beautiful day. That's how I would leave the rest stops and get going down the road. Hell, I even took care of a couple hills and was telling myself, hey, see, it's all good. I think those bouts of positivity were like sugar highs. They hit hard and you feel great, but then there's that crash from it. And when you have climb after climb and your every ounce is depleted and you see you still have a few thousand more feet to climb, those drops from the positive high hit extra hard. But I kept rolling over those cranks and moving down the road, one climb at a time. You're just trying to survive. You're not trying to win. Forget the timed sections and focus just on the finish line. And then it happened again. A steep hill and I'm barely moving. I just try to tell myself to just keep pedaling. Just keep pedaling, pedaling, pedaling. Thanks, Finding Nemo. The hill is almost done. And then it hit again. I can't do this. I stopped and just stood there. What the hell am I doing? Why did I think I could do this course? You aren't anything like all those other riders. Yeah, there was another rider behind me walking his bike up, but that's not me. I don't walk it. I always ride it. Nope. You're not that guy. You aren't good. You just have the looks and none of the talent. I walked up the rest of the hill, and while I was at the top taking a pause and, again, trying to center myself, the other walker got to me. We chatted a few minutes about the hills and having to walk up a couple of them. I wished him good luck on the rest of the ride, and off I went. At this point, I started to wonder if I was going to make it to the end of the ride, or if I was going to wait for the support vehicle to toss my bike onto and get a ride to the finish line. That's also something I've never done. But hell, I walked up 2 hills. I might as well take that extra stamp and just call it quits. Maybe the next time I see a vehicle, I'll just put my hand up and give in. I mean, come on, I'm not a real cyclist. I'm just a poser on a bike. And yet, somehow, I still kept rolling along. I saw a vehicle, and when they're passing, I gave a thumbs up. You know, the typical sign to let them know you're good. What was I thinking? Oh, yeah, trying to finish the damn thing. And then the next issue hit. I was going down a little descent, and some bad noise and feelings came from the back wheel. I pulled to the side and saw that I had broken a spoke. Great. Well, guess this is the end of the ride. I can call it quits now and just blame it on the wheel. I would totally finish it, sure, but look, bad wheel. I remember watching a cycling video where that happened and they wrapped the broken spoke around another spoke and were able to just keep rolling to their destination. So I looked it up to see if it was an okay thing to do or not. And yeah, you can do that for a quick fix to get you where you're going, but not like a long-term solution. And here I was looking at another 40 miles to go. Yeah, I was broken inside and out at only the 60-ish mile mark of the ride. But I wound the broken spoke around a different spoke and got rolling again. Now I was getting a new sound. It was the sound of the rotor rubbing against the brakes. Because the spoke was broken, The tension on the wheel was wrong, and so now everything was just a little wonky and wobbly. I was able to ignore the sound for a little bit, but then it became just too much. With everything else that was swimming in my head, I just couldn't take that sound. It didn't help that I was busting my ass trying to get up another climb, and that struggle, paired with the noisy rub, just got too much for me. I stopped and decided to try and reposition my caliper to compensate for the wobbly wheel. Maybe that would at least do something. While I was there, about to work on the bike, one of the service vehicles showed up and asked if I needed help. I told him I broke a spoke, and he asked, well, do you want to ride, or do you want me to fix it so you can ride to the end? I had my out. I was able to quit and not feel guilty about it. I answered, well, if you can fix it, that'd be great. He popped out and saw it and said it was in pretty good shape. The wheel didn't look too bad at all. He rewrapped the spoke and then tightened some others to offset the broken one, and my wheel was spinning straight again. No rub, no wobbling. All right, I guess I'm finishing this thing out and not sagging out. Off I went and continued on the way. Why? Why did I not take that out that was handed to me? Because I have to finish on my own. I'm already a failure in the hills, and I didn't want to be a failure for the ride as a whole. If I didn't finish the ride, then that was the final bit of proof that I really wasn't the cyclist I thought, and that really I was just a flashy looking imposter. So am I a fraud or not? Now, this is not to say that people that do have to stop for one reason or another are imposters or frauds or fakes. This is just an internal struggle that I have with myself. Those last 40 miles were rough. My legs carried me where my mind wasn't able to. For the next 15 miles or so, I was seriously asking myself if I wanted to just throw in the towel and call it quits. Telling myself there's no point in finishing, you're done. When I made it to a rest stop and there was a SAG vehicle there, I looked long and hard at it and was trying to find the courage to go over and load up my bike. But I didn't. I think some of it was out of embarrassment. I didn't want all these others to see that I couldn't hack it. How stupid and vain of me. These people don't know me, and they'll probably never see me again. So what do I care? But I do care. I didn't want to be seen as a failure or a fraud. I finished my drink and banana, and off I went again. Somehow I kept knocking off those miles, and by the time I got to only about 20 miles remaining, I kept saying, oh, this is just a little longer than my commute. This isn't a big deal. I've got this. I made it back to town and crossed the finish line. I had finally done it. I missed all the celebrations of the people who made it to the podiums. I missed the raffle for all the cool giveaways, but I did make it to the end on my bike. Like, I say this ride broke me, but I guess it didn't completely break me because I never gave up fully. I struggled on the hills and the self-doubt was overwhelming, but I never sagged out. I crossed the line and never quit the ride. So maybe broke me are the wrong words to use, but it certainly cracked me good. It's been a few weeks, and even now I have wisps of that doubt and you aren't really a cyclist. You don't deserve to wear the gear or ride the bikes you have. Thoughts. It's tough. That ride changed me. I think some for good and some for bad. I did learn on that ride, but damn if it didn't come at a cost. And that cost is something I'll have to figure out how to work through. This was the hardest ride I'd ever done. This ride was the most climbing I'd ever done in a single ride. This ride let me know that I have such a long way to go if I want to consider myself competitive with cycling. This ride also taught me that I have a lot to learn about managing and controlling the negative thoughts and feelings when struggling on the bike. It was a rough day for me, and even now I feel like I shouldn't be doing any fondos or try to be competitive with them. And instead of saying I'm a cyclist, I should just say I like to ride bikes. To not identify as a cyclist because I don't match up to what all that means, at least what it means in my head. But another part of me is like, look, you did the ride. Sure, you walked a little bit, but you weren't the only one. You weren't the last person in any of the time sections for your age group. You completed the ride on your bike. You had mechanical issues, and instead of quitting, you worked through it and kept going. And that's something to be happy and proud of. You tackled 2 challenging rides in 2 days, with the second day being something you've never attempted before. You got out there and pushed yourself to the limit and succeeded in finishing it, despite the hardships and the issues. The level of physical and mental struggle of this ride was something I don't think I was prepared for. It's a lot to digest during and after the ride. And that's why it's taken a couple weeks for me to sit down and kind of think this all out and verbalize it. During this time, I've been rolling a couple quotes in my head, just as a reminder. One is, I was taught the way of progress is neither swift nor easy. That's Madame Curie. And the other is, never confuse a single defeat with a final defeat. It's a thanks courtesy of F. Scott Fitzgerald. So yeah, lots of lessons learned there. Some of the lessons dealt with mental and training, and some dealt with gear and equipment. And equipment is something I want to talk about, but you know what? That'll have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for joining me in this cafe stop and listening. Let's continue this soon. If you want to reach out and share your journey or have questions, email me, joshua@jqcyclist.com.